Hello, people. In this video, I'm going to break down a couple of points on the 2020 Dbq rubric. These points are evidence points 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so first, I want to just point out that I do have a couple other videos. I'm going to continue making videos that goes through each part of the Dbq rubric, okay, for the 2020 Dbq exam. Now, this applies to AP US history and AP European history. So if you're taking any of those classes, this should apply to you. I hope they're helpful. Okay, let's share screen with you for a moment and you can take a look at that Dbq rubric. Now, in the past, you only have 3 evidence points. Now you have 5. So the first 3 I'm going to go through in this video. 1 point you get for using the content of at least 2 documents to address the topic of the prompt. Now, this is the only point other than contextualization that you can get without actually having a thesis. You'll notice the wording right here that it says addresses the topic of the prompt. And all of the other points, with the exception of contextualization, it will say something like argument. Argument is another word for thesis. If you don't have those points. So evidence point number 1, you can get. And it says to earn this point, the response must accurately describe rather than simply quote the content from at least 2 of the documents. Just a reminder, the 2020 Dbq has 5 documents. So you are basically going to be demonstrating to the reader that you understood 2 of them and how they relate to the topic of the prompt. So you could summarize, if you will, in a sentence, maybe 2 sentences, 2 documents, and you got that point. Okay. Now, I'm not going to suggest you stop there because you can get multiple points by doing 1 or 2 different things. And I'm going to talk about what that looks like with evidence point 2 and 3. Evidence point 2 and 3, and going back to our actual rubric here, says that you are supporting an argument in response to the prompt using 2 documents, and then you raise the stakes to 4 documents for evidence point number 3 there. Again, to earn that point, you have to accurately describe, like you did in evidence point number 1, and then you have to use that content of the documents to support your argument that you made or your claim in your thesis. Okay, so you can effectively get 3 evidence points by interacting with 4 out of 5 of the documents and using that interaction to support your thesis. Now, as I've said many times, a Dbq is very similar to an LEQ in that you are answering a similar type prompt. The difference is that they give you the majority of the evidence in those documents. So if you just interact appropriately and properly with those documents and with that evidence, you should be able to get all 3 of those evidence points. Now, in a 45-minute Dbq that you're having for the 2020 exam, that means you can throw away 1 doc. And I don't mean throw it away like ignore it. I mean, do not dwell on the document that you don't understand. Know that rubric and that you can get away with just doing 4. So if you are reading document number 2, for example, and it's just not happening in here, move on. You may have time to come back to it, but you really need to be interacting with 4 of those documents and using that interaction to support your argument. Let's look at that Dbq that I looked at in the previous ones, and hopefully that will help you understand what you're supposed to be doing here. Okay, so this is from the previous year's Dbq. It says evaluate the extent to which the Portuguese transformed maritime trade. So how am I going to look at these documents? And remember, I have to have an argument. So the extent is how much did the Portuguese transform the trade? Let's just say, I'm not going to read through the documents right here, but let's just say that documents 1, 2, and 3 demonstrate that in the early part of the 16th century, the Portuguese had a minor impact on maritime trade in the Indian Ocean. And then documents 4 and 5 demonstrate that the Portuguese had a major impact in the later part of the 16th century. So that's my argument, right? That's my thesis, that we have a gradual increase in the impact as the century progresses for that 16th century. And so those documents, so I'll say something like, document 2, which was written by so-and-so at this point in time in, I don't know, 1529, demonstrates and you summarize it. So here's what happened in the document. This demonstrates that the impact of the Portuguese in the Indian Ocean trade was not very widespread at this time because, I don't know, maybe the local rulers still had a lot of power and weren't really interacting a whole lot with the Portuguese, but you're using that document as proof that the impact was less at this point. You're not just saying, here's what the document 2 is about. You're saying this is how document 2 proves that the Portuguese had a lesser impact during the first part of the 16th century than they did at the later part of the 16th century. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, comment below and I can give you some other examples. But again, the idea is that I'm saying that in this document, here's what happened. And as a result of what happened, here's how my thesis is proved. Okay, here's how I'm demonstrating that this is what happened with the Portuguese impact on the Indian Ocean trade. Okay, again, if you have questions, please post them on the comments below, and hopefully we'll get to those other points and evidence points number 4 and 5 in later videos. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you soon.